Daniel Carter grabbed the woman's wrist and spun her around. "Who sent you?" Madison Brooks stared up at him, rain pouring down her face. A baby pressed against her chest, her wrist locked in his grip, and said nothing. For 3 full seconds, neither of them moved. Then the baby cried, and Daniel let go. He stepped back. His hands were shaking. 7 years. 7 years since that name, that face, that voice had existed anywhere in his life, except the part of his brain he had spent considerable effort teaching to stay quiet. And now she was standing on his porch at 10 o'clock at night in the middle of a rainstorm, soaking wet, holding an infant, looking at him like she had rehearsed this moment 1,000 times and forgotten every word the second he opened the door. "Daniel," she said. Her voice was barely above the rain. "I didn't come back to hurt you. I came back because she's yours." The world stopped. Drop your city in the comments. I want to see how far this story travels. If you haven't subscribed yet, hit that button now. Because what Madison just said is either the truth that changes everything or the lie that destroys what little Daniel has left. The mug was a gift from his daughter. Emma had painted it herself in 2nd grade crooked handle, blue and yellow stripes, and Dade spelled out in thick, uneven letters across the side. Daniel had used it every single morning for 3 years, ever since the day she pressed it into his hands, with flour still on her fingers, and said, "I made it so you always have something nice to hold." When it hit the tile and cracked into 4 pieces, Daniel didn't move. He just stood there, looking down at it, listening to the rain hammer the roof, and tried to remember how to breathe. Because the woman on his porch wasn't supposed to exist anymore. Not in his world. Not on his street. Not in this version of his life that he had spent the better part of 7 years carefully, painfully, brick by brick rebuilding from scratch. Madison Brooks was supposed to be a memory. The kind that still hurts when the weather changes, the way an old broken bone will ache before a storm dull. Persistent and completely impossible to ignore, but ultimately something you learn to live with. Something you stop mentioning to people, because the explanation takes too long and the sympathy runs out faster than the pain does. He had learned to live with it. He had learned to live with a lot of things. He stood there in the doorway, and the rain blew sideways and soaked the front of his shirt. And Madison looked at him the way a person looks at a ledge they are about to step off of, terrified, resolved, and past the point of turning back. She was different. He registered that immediately, the way you register a song you haven't heard in years. The first second it starts playing, instant recognition. Then a wave of something that doesn't have a clean name. She was different, and she was the same, and she was standing on his porch, in the rain, holding a baby. And Daniel Carter, who prided himself on never being caught off guard twice by the same thing in his life, had absolutely nothing. Madison. Just her name. That was all he had. "I know," she said. Her voice was lower than he remembered, steadier. But underneath it, way underneath it, something was trembling. "I know how this looks," she said. "I know I have no right to be here. I know that better than you do, Daniel. I promise you I do. But I didn't, I ran out of." She stopped, pressed her lips together. The baby shifted against her chest and let out a small sound. Not a cry, more like a question. And Madison's arms tightened around it automatically, the way a person holds something they are terrified of dropping. I didn't know where else to go. Daniel looked at her. He looked at the baby. He looked at the rain coming down in sheets off the edge of his porch roof. And he thought about 7 years. And he thought about Emma asleep upstairs. And he thought about the mug in 4 pieces on the kitchen floor. Then he stepped back and opened the door wider. "Come inside," he said. He got her a towel without asking. He put water on for tea without asking. He did these things because his hands needed something to do, and because the alternative was standing in the middle of his kitchen, staring at Madison Brooks sitting at his table. And he was not ready to do that yet. She was getting the baby dry. She'd unwrapped the wet blanket and was working through a diaper bag with the focused efficiency of someone who had learned necessity fast and recently. Her hands were competent. Her jaw was set. She didn't look up at him while she worked, and he was grateful for that, because he was fairly certain his face was doing things he hadn't given it permission to do. "Boy or girl?" he asked, because he had to start somewhere. girl, Madison said. Her name is Lily. She's 4 months old. Okay, Daniel said. He poured water into 2 mugs, the plain ones, the ones that didn't mean anything, and set one in front of her. Madison looked up at him then. Her eyes were brown and tired, and the rain had done something to her hair, and there was a mark on her jawline that might have been exhaustion, and might have been something she'd been crying through for several days. He couldn't tell. He didn't ask. You want to know everything, she said. I want to know what matters right now, he said. The rest can wait. She nodded slowly. Like that answer surprised her. The baby, she said. Lily, she belonged to my sister. Daniel set his mug down. Renee, he said. Yeah. Madison's voice didn't break, but it went somewhere flat and careful, the way a voice goes when it's been over the same ground. So many times it's worn itself smooth. Renee died 6 weeks ago. Aneurysm, nobody saw it coming. She was 31 years old, and she dropped in her apartment, and that was it. God. Madison, I'm sorry, I'm her only family, Madison said. Our parents are gone. There's no one else. Renee named me guardian 3 years ago, before Lily existed, kind of as a formality, because we'd done all that paperwork together. And we both thought it was just, something you do. Something that would never actually happen. She looked down at Lily, who was awake now, dark eyes open and patient, one small fist pressed against her cheek. And then it happened, Madison said. Daniel sat down across from her. He didn't say anything, because there wasn't anything useful to say. And he had learned in the last 4 years of raising Emma alone that silence was sometimes the most decent thing you could offer a person who was carrying something too heavy to put down. I've been handling it, Madison said. I need you to know that. I've been handling the legal stuff, and the work schedule, and the daycare situation, and all of it. I'm not here because I fell apart. I need you to understand that, before I say the next part. I understand, Daniel said. I'm here because my apartment building sold. She said it. The way you say something you've already explained to so many people that the words have stopped feeling real. The new owners gave us 60 days. 60 days. Which should have been enough time to find something else. Except I'm a single woman with a 4-month-old and a moderately unpredictable work schedule. And apparently that combination makes me a liability to every landlord in a 70-mile radius. And I have been on 14 waiting lists, and I have seen 22 apartments in the last 3 weeks, and every single one of them has fallen through. For a reason that was either insulting or absurd, she stopped. She picked up the mug of tea and held it in both hands and stared at the surface of it. And today was my last day in the apartment, she said, and I called everyone I could think of. My friend Cora in Columbus has a studio and a new boyfriend and couldn't make it work. My friend Patricia in Dayton said she would call me back, and never did. My coworker Janelle offered me her mother's spare room, except her mother has a dog that Lily is apparently allergic to. Because we tried it for one night, and Lily cried for 6 hours straight. She paused. I drove for a while after that. I didn't know where I was going. And then I did know. And I told myself I wouldn't. And then I was parked in front of your house. She looked up at him. You were the last person on my list, she said. I need you to know that too. I didn't come here because I wanted to mess with whatever you've built. You were the last option. Daniel looked at her for a long time. Madison. I know. I wasn't going to say anything bad, she blinked. I was going to say, he said, that I'm sorry it took you that long to get here. Not because I wanted to be chosen first. Because you were sitting in your car in the rain for God knows how long talking yourself out of knocking on my door. And that sounds exhausting. Madison stared at him. Okay, she said very quietly. You can stay, he said. There's a guest room. It's nothing fancy, but it has a door that closes, which I'm guessing is the main thing right now. Daniel, I have one condition, he said. She went still. This isn't about the past, he said. I'm not saying that to be cold. I'm saying it because if you're going to be in this house, we both need to be here for the right reasons. You need stability for that baby. My daughter doesn't need to watch 2 adults perform some kind of unresolved drama in her kitchen. So we are going to be 2 adults who are helping each other through a hard season. That is the deal. Madison held his gaze for a moment. 2 adults, she said. 2 adults, he said. What about the part where you haven't seen me in 7 years and there's presumably—" She paused a lot of ground between then and now. "That ground isn't going anywhere," Daniel said. "It'll still be there when things are less urgent." She nodded slowly. He picked up his mug. She picked up hers. Lily made a small, satisfied sound and grabbed a fistful of Madison's shirt and held on. Emma came downstairs at 7:15 the next morning in her blue pajamas with the owls on them, still half asleep, dragging a stuffed elephant named Gerald by one ear, and stopped completely in the kitchen doorway. She was 8 years old. She had Daniel's brown eyes and her mother's stubbornness, which was saying something, because Daniel himself was not exactly a pushover. She looked at Madison. She looked at the baby in Madison's lap. She looked at her father standing at the stove. "Dad," she said. "Good morning, Bug. There is a baby in our kitchen." "There is. And a woman, Emma. This is Madison. She's an old friend. She's going to be staying with us for a little while." Emma turned her full attention to Madison with the particular focused scrutiny of a child who has not yet learned to pretend she isn't studying you. "Hi," Madison said. "Hi," Emma said. "Is that your baby?" "Her name is Lily. She's my niece. I'm taking care of her." Emma crossed the kitchen, still dragging Gerald, and stopped 2 feet from Madison to peer down at Lily with great seriousness. "She's small," Emma said. "She is," Madison agreed. "Her hands are really small, they are. Her whole self is pretty small right now." "How old?" 4 months. Emma processed this. "Does she talk?" "Not yet. In a few months she'll start making more sounds." "Gerald didn't talk either," Emma said, holding up the elephant. "But I taught him anyway. You have to be patient." Madison's face did something that Daniel had to look away from. "That's really good advice," Madison said. "Thank you." Emma turned to her father. "Can I hold her?" "After breakfast," Daniel said. "Go sit down." Emma went and sat down, but she kept her eyes on Lily the whole time. The way a person watches something they've already decided they want to understand. The first week was not comfortable. Daniel had not expected it to be. He was a man who had organized his life carefully. He woke at 5:30. He made Emma's lunch the night before. He left a 20-minute buffer in every morning routine because Emma was 8 and 8-year-olds treated tougher-time as a suggestion rather than a structure. He had routines and systems and a particular place for everything, not because he was rigid, but because when you are the only adult in a house, routine is the thing that keeps the floor from dropping out.
Madison moved through his house like someone who was trying very hard not to touch anything.
She was neat. She was quiet. She woke up with Lily at night, and he could hear her through the wall soft footsteps, the low murmur of her voice talking the baby through it, and she always had the guest room door closed before Emma was up, as if she was trying to be invisible. He noticed she ate whatever he cooked without commenting. He noticed she did the dishes without being asked. He noticed she kept her things, a modest number of bags, and a portable crib, and a paper bag of baby supplies pushed against one wall of the guest room, with a precision that suggested she was aware, every moment, that she was a guest. He also noticed that she was exhausted. Not regular tired. The kind of tired that gets into a person's posture. The kind that comes from grief that has to be postponed, because there are responsibilities that can't wait. He recognized it. Because he had worn it himself for the better part of a year after he lost Catherine, Emma's mother, and he understood that you could carry that kind of tired for months without anyone around you having any idea how much weight you were actually moving. He didn't say anything about it the first week. He just made extra coffee. It was Lily who cracked the distance. Not some big moment, not a conversation, just Lily, on a Thursday evening, deciding she was done being held and needed to be put down on the living room floor on her blanket, and Daniel, passing through on his way to deal with a load of laundry, sitting down on the floor beside her because she was making faces at the ceiling light, and it was frankly the funniest thing he'd seen all week. Madison came in from the kitchen and stopped. "Sorry," Daniel said automatically. "Don't be sorry," she said. She sat down cross-legged on the other side of the blanket. She likes the ceiling fan. She's been tracking it with her eyes for 3 days. I think she thinks it's a living creature. It kind of moves like one, Daniel said. She watches it and gets this look on her face like she can't decide if it's a threat or a friend. Smart baby, he said. Healthy instinct. Madison smiled, not the careful, controlled smile she'd been moving around the house with for a week. A real one, quick and involuntary, gone almost as fast as it came. Daniel looked away before she could see him noticing. She sleep any better last night? He asked. 3-hour stretch, which is a record, Madison said. I woke up at the end of it in a panic because the silence felt wrong. Yeah, he said. That happens. Emma pulled a 4-hour stretch at about that age, and I sat beside the crib for 45 minutes listening to her breathe because I was convinced something was wrong. What convinced you she was fine? She woke up and screamed for food, he said. That was pretty definitive. Madison laughed. It was a real laugh. Short and quiet, but genuine, and it changed something in the room in a way Daniel filed away and didn't examine. Daniel, she said after a moment. I want you to know that I haven't forgotten what you said about this not being about the past. He looked at her. I'm not trying to push on that, she said. I think you deserve to know that I haven't forgotten, and that I'm not here to complicate your life. I know I already am, just by existing in it. But that's not the intent. I know, he said. You can't know that, Madison. He turned to look at her directly, because she was deflecting, and he recognized deflecting. I know because of how hard you're trying not to take up space. Which, for the record, you're allowed to take up space. You're in my house. That means you're allowed to be here. She looked at him. You didn't used to be like that, she said. Like what? That direct, she said. That I don't know the word. Settled. He was quiet for a moment. I had to get like that, he said. When Emma's mom died, I didn't have the luxury of being uncertain. I had a 3-year-old asking me questions I didn't know how to answer. You get settled real fast or you fall apart. And falling apart wasn't an option. Madison's eyes were steady on his face. How long ago, she asked. 4 years, he said. I'm sorry, she said. I didn't know. I know you didn't. A beat. Her name was Catherine, he said. She was a good person. Emma has her chin and her way of crossing her arms when she's made up her mind about something. He paused. She would have liked you. She liked people who were honest about what they were carrying. Madison looked down at Lily. I'm working on the honest part, she said. You knocked on my door, he said. That's a start. The second week was easier than the first. Not easy, easier. Emma had decided that Madison and Lily were facts of her life, and Emma, once she decided something was a fact, committed to it fully. She came home from school and went directly to whatever room Lily was in. She narrated her day to the baby in complete sentences. She made up songs about Gerald the elephant and performed them for Lily with absolute unself-conscious seriousness. And Lily, who apparently had excellent tastes, responded to these performances with focused attention and the occasional delighted sound. She likes me, Emma told Daniel one night. She does, he agreed. It's because I take her seriously, Emma said. You have to take babies seriously. They know when you don't. Where did you learn that? Emma shrugged. He looked up. When? Yesterday, when I was talking to Lily and you were outside. Madison said, the best thing you can do for a baby is make them feel like what they're doing is important, even if it's just looking at a ceiling fan. Daniel set his dish towel down. Madison said that. She talks to her like that all the time, Emma said. She narrates everything. Like she tells Lily what she's doing when she's doing it. So, Lily's brain learns words from everything. Did you know babies' brains are building like 1 million connections a second? I did not know that number specifically. Madison told me that too. Emma tilted her head. She knows a lot about brains. She studied counseling, Daniel said. She wanted to work with people. Did she? I don't know what she does now, he said honestly. We've got a lot of catching up to do. Emma looked at him with the particular measurement that 8-year-olds deploy when they are trying to read an adult and not quite getting the whole picture. Dad, she said. Yeah. Were you and Madison friends before? He picked the dish towel back up. We were, he said. A long time ago. What happened? He thought about how to answer that. He thought about what was true, and what was accurate, and what was appropriate, and what Emma, who was 8 and perceptive and persistent, actually needed to know. We lost track of each other, he said. Emma considered this. Is that the whole story? It's the part that matters right now, he said. She looked at him. That's a very dad answer, she said, and picked up Gerald and went upstairs. Daniel stood in the kitchen alone and stared at the dishes and thought about 7 years and what they weighed. And outside through the window, the sky was doing something complicated with the clouds. And somewhere upstairs, Madison was talking to Lily in the low, patient voice she used when she was narrating the world to someone too young to understand it yet. He found the papers on a Saturday. Not found, exactly. Madison left them on the kitchen table because she'd been working through them the night before and fallen asleep before she could put them away. And Daniel came downstairs at 5:30, and there they were, a stack of legal documents with official letterheads and highlighted sections and handwritten notes in Madison's script in the margins. He didn't read them, but he saw enough. Temporary guardianship, petition for permanent placement, a notation from a caseworker about housing instability. He stood there with his hand on the coffee pot and read that last phrase twice. Housing instability. 2 words, bureaucratic and cold. That meant Madison could lose Lily. That the system could look at her situation, a woman without a permanent address, without family support, navigating grief, and a new job and a 4-month-old, and decide that wasn't sufficient, that the baby deserved better than what Madison could currently provide. He set the coffee pot down very carefully. Then he went and sat at the table and waited. Madison came downstairs at 6, saw the papers, and stopped. Daniel, how serious is this? He said. She looked at the papers. She looked at him. The housing thing is the main issue, she said. My caseworker has been good, sympathetic, but there's a review scheduled in 3 weeks, and if I can't demonstrate stable housing by then, she stopped. There's a couple. They've expressed interest in Lily. They're already licensed. If I can't show that I can provide a stable environment, they have grounds to petition. Daniel was quiet. Why didn't you tell me this? Because you've already done enough, she said. Because you already have a full life and I am already in the middle of it, and there are limits, Madison. His voice was flat, not angry. Flat. The tone he used when he was holding something in because losing it wouldn't help. We are going to talk about the limit thing later. Right now I'm asking why you didn't tell me. She sat down across from him. Because telling you makes it real, she said quietly. Because as long as I was the only one who knew, I could still manage how scared I was. He looked at her for a long moment. Okay, he said. Okay, 3 weeks is enough time, he said. She stared at him. Daniel, we can document this, he said. You've been here 2 weeks. The caseworker does a home visit, right? That's how this works? Yes. But then we make sure this is the home they visit, he said. Not a hypothetical future apartment. Here, you have a room. Lily has a safe place to sleep. Emma is clearly attached to that baby, which probably helps, and I'm willing to speak to anyone who needs to be spoken to about the stability of this situation. Madison's mouth was slightly open. You'd do that, she said. I just said I would. Why? He looked at her, really looked at her, across the table in his kitchen, in the early morning light. And the answer was obvious and complicated, and full of 7 years of weight. And he wasn't ready to say all of it out loud. So he said the part he was ready for. Because that little girl upstairs doesn't know anything about adult history or unresolved complications, he said. She knows she's safe here. That's worth protecting. Madison pressed her lips together. She nodded once. Okay, she said. Okay, he said. He got up and poured the coffee. Emma padded into the kitchen at 7. Owl pajamas, Gerald. The whole production. And stopped when she saw both of them at the table. She looked at her father. She looked at Madison. She looked at the stack of papers. Is everything okay? She asked. Everything's fine, Daniel said. Want pancakes? Emma looked at Madison. Madison managed a smile. Your dad makes good pancakes, Emma asked her. I'm about to find out, Madison said. Emma nodded seriously. He does, she said. The secret is he lets the batter rest. Most people don't wait. I'll remember that, Madison said. Emma went and sat beside Madison at the table and set Gerald on the table facing her, carefully, and began to tell him about something that had happened at school in a low, serious voice, as though picking up a conversation they'd been having for years. Daniel stood at the stove and meshed a bowl and thought about the papers on the table and the 3 weeks he'd just committed to, and the particular weight of a promise made before coffee, which everyone knows is the most binding kind. He let the batter rest. The kitchen filled with warmth and the smell of something cooking, and Lily slept upstairs, and outside the morning was coming up slow and gray and entirely indifferent, the way mornings do moving forward, whether you're ready or not. Daniel did not move. He stood in the doorway with the rain blowing past him, and those 2 words, sitting in the Michelin chest like a blade that had gone in clean and hadn't started hurting yet. She's yours. He looked at Madison. He looked at the baby. He looked at Madison again. Say that again, he said. His voice came out quieter than he intended. Quieter and flatter, and completely without the anger he could feel building somewhere underneath it, because the anger hadn't figured out where to go yet. Daniel, say it again, he said. Look me in the eye and say it again. Madison looked him in the eye. She's yours, she said. The baby was still crying. Small, insistent, completely indifferent to the fact that the man standing 3 feet away from her had just had the floor removed from underneath his entire understanding of the last 7 years. Daniel stepped back from the door. Not an invitation, just a step back, because he needed the wall behind him, and he needed it immediately. Madison came inside. She had to. The rain was coming sideways now, and the baby was soaking, and whatever was about to happen between the 2 of them, the infant had not done anything to deserve pneumonia. Daniel closed the door. He turned around. Madison was standing in his hallway, dripping on his floor, and she was not looking at him anymore. She was looking at the baby, adjusting the wet blanket, making the automatic small sounds that a person makes when they are trying to calm something down. And Daniel recognized with a sharp, sudden clarity that she was also trying to calm herself down, and that the confidence she'd had on the porch when she said those 2 words had cost her something significant. Sit down, he said. Daniel, sit down, Madison. Before I say anything else, I need you to sit down, and I need that baby to stop crying. Because I cannot think with that sound happening, and what I need to do right now more than anything is think. She sat. She sat on his couch, and she held the baby against her shoulder, and she rubbed small circles on the infant's back, and murmured something too low for him to hear. And slowly, reluctantly, the crying wound down to hiccups, and then to silence. Daniel stood in the middle of his own living room and looked at a child he had not known existed 20 minutes ago. She was small. 4, maybe 5 months, he guessed, though he was working from memory of what Emma had looked like at that age, and Emma had been, according to every nurse who encountered her, an unusually large baby. This one was smaller, dark eyes currently focused on his face, with the unnerving directness that infants have, like they are reading something in you that you haven't finished writing yet. She had a small nose. She had Madison's mouth, and she had a birthmark on her left temple, a small reddish-brown mark the size of a thumbnail. In exactly the same place, Daniel's mother had one. In exactly the same place, Daniel's mother had told him, more than once, that it ran in the family. He sat down in the chair across from her. Madison took a breath. I left, she said, because I was pregnant. He stared at her. I didn't know when I left, she said quickly. I need you to understand that. I left for other reasons. Reasons I am going to explain to you, because you deserve the full picture. But I did not know about Lily when I went. I found out 6 weeks after I got to Portland. Portland, he said. I took a job there. A counseling position at a residential facility. It was a good opportunity, and she stopped. Reorganized. I left, Daniel, because your father called me. The room went very still. My father, Daniel said, 3 days before I left. He called me on my cell phone, which I still don't know how he got, and he told me. Madison's jaw tightened. He told me that you were going to propose, that he knew you had a ring, and he told me that if I loved you, I would leave before you did. Daniel said nothing. He said, You were drowning, Madison said. He said you were working 60 hours a week to support him and your mother's medical bills, and that you were never going to chase your own life as long as you had something worth staying for. He said, I was the thing keeping you in place. She looked down at Lily. He said it kindly. That was the thing that got me. He didn't say it like he hated me. He said it like he genuinely believed it, Like letting you go was the most loving thing I could do. Daniel's hands were flat on his knees. His father, Raymond Carter, who had died 2 years ago, who Daniel had sat beside in a hospital room and held his hand through, who Daniel had eulogized in front of 40 people as a difficult man who had loved imperfectly but loved fully. His father had made a phone call. He was wrong, Daniel said. The words came out very controlled, which was not how they felt. He was completely wrong. I wasn't drowning. I was 26 years old and I was handling it. I know that now, Madison said. You should have called me, he said. You should have told me what he said and let me respond to it. You didn't get to make that decision for me, Madison. I know that now too. 7 years, he said. I know. 7 years I thought you just. He stopped. His hand came up and pressed against his mouth for a moment and then came back down. I thought you looked at what I had going on and decided it wasn't worth it. I thought you calculated the situation and found it lacking. That's what I lived with. That's the story I told myself for 7 years. Madison's eyes were wet. I'm sorry, she said. Don't, he said. Don't apologize yet. I'm not ready for that yet. Keep talking. She kept talking. She told him about Portland. About finding out she was pregnant on a Tuesday morning in a bathroom of a studio apartment she'd rented, sight unseen. Sitting on the edge of a bathtub she hadn't cleaned yet, staring at a test strip and doing math. She told him about the days that followed. About picking up the phone to call him approximately 11 times and putting it back down. About the story she'd constructed, the one where calling him would pull him back into obligation, would tie him to her, and to a baby, and to a situation that his father had just told her was already crushing him. About the way grief and fear and stubborn, misguided love can build a logic that feels airtight from the inside and catastrophic from the outside. She told him about her sister Renee, who had been the only person in the world who knew, who had driven to Portland when Madison was 5 months along and sat on that same uncleaned bathroom floor with her and said, in the direct, undecorated way, Renee said everything. You are making a mistake, but I will help you make it as well as possible. She told him about the arrangement they had made, that Renee would be listed as Lily's aunt, not because they were hiding anything from the legal record, but because Renee was the stable one, the one with an address that didn't change, the one who could be the consistent presence while Madison was still building her footing. That the plan had been for Madison to get settled, to get stable, and then to call Daniel and tell him everything. And then Renee died, Daniel said. And then Renee died, Madison said. 6 weeks ago. And the person who was supposed to help me figure out how to have this conversation is gone. And I have a 4-month-old, and I am completely alone. And I drove here in the rain because she needed to know her father and I needed. She stopped. Her voice had been holding steady through all of it. The flat, careful tone of a woman who has been through this narrative in her own head enough times to have worn the emotion off the surface. But it cracked there, just slightly, just for a second, like a hairline fracture in something that is otherwise solid. I needed to stop carrying this alone. Daniel stood up. He walked to the window. He stood there with his back to her and looked at the rain on the glass and tried to locate himself inside the last 20 minutes. Because he had gone to bed last night as a man with a specific, carefully organized life and had woken up this morning the same man. And sometime between then and now, the entire architecture of the last 7 years had been restructured without his permission. He had a daughter. He had 2 daughters. What's her full name? He asked. He was still looking at the window. Lily Renee Brooks, Madison said. Behind him, Brooks, he said. Yes, I can change that. That's part of why. I'm not criticizing it, he said. I'm just saying it. He turned around. Lily was looking at him again over Madison's shoulder, those dark, patient eyes tracking him, the way infants track things that interest them, with complete unconscious intensity. Hi, Daniel said to her. Lily blinked. He crossed the room and crouched down in front of the couch, at eye level with her, and she watched him come without flinching, without crying, just watching. And he was close enough now to see the birthmark clearly. Small and reddish-brown, and right where he knew it would be. His throat did something complicated. Hi, Lily, he said. Quieter. Lily reached out one small, uncoordinated hand and grabbed his finger. Daniel closed his eyes. He sat on the floor. He didn't plan it. His knees just went, and he was sitting on his own living room floor, with his back against the couch, and Lily's fist still wrapped around his finger. And Madison sat very still above him and didn't say anything. Because there was nothing to say. They stayed like that for a while. Outside, the rain was doing what rain does, which is continue, regardless of what's happening to the people inside. "Emma's asleep upstairs," Daniel said finally. "I know. I saw the light was off. She's 8, he said. She's smart and she asks direct questions, and she is going to want to know what's happening the second she wakes up. I know. I'm going to need to figure out what to tell her," he said. "Daniel, you don't have to." "Madison," he said her name without turning around. "I am holding my daughter's hand. I am past the point of deciding whether to engage with this. I'm in it. The question now is how we handle what comes next." A pause. "Okay," she said. "You can stay," he said. "The guest room offer still stands. But I need you to understand that things are different now than they were an hour ago." "I understand. An hour ago you were a woman I used to know who needed help," he said. "Now you're the mother of my child, and that doesn't have a simple protocol." "No," she said. "It doesn't." He looked at Lily's hand around his finger. Tiny. Impossibly tiny the way newborns' hands are. Like they were made by someone working at a scale the rest of the world doesn't use. "Was she healthy?" he asked. "The pregnancy, was it normal?" "Yes," Madison said. "Completely normal. She was born at 39 weeks. 7 pounds, 2 ounces. She scored well on all the early tests. She's healthy, Daniel." "Good," he said. "That's good." Another silence. "Are you angry?" Madison asked. He thought about the question seriously, because it deserved a serious answer. "I'm a lot of things," he said. "Angry is in there. It's not the loudest thing right now." "What's the loudest thing?" He looked at Lily. "I missed 4 months," he said. "I missed the first 4 months, and I can't get those back. That's the loudest thing right now." Madison's made a sound above him that he couldn't interpret and didn't turn around to see. He made her tea again. Same as that first night, 2 weeks ago, when she'd shown up with Lily and a story he had only partially understood. He put water on and got the mugs out and stood at the counter and thought about his father, because that was the part he hadn't let himself get to yet. Raymond Carter. His father had been a complicated man in the way that men of a certain generation are complicated, which is to say he had loved his family with a ferocity that he'd never quite learned to express without controlling it. He had opinions about what Daniel's life should look like. He'd had opinions about Catherine, too. At first, before Emma arrived and softened something in him, the way grandchildren have a tendency to do. Daniel had never known about the phone call. He thought about that now. His father had made a decision, had reached out behind Daniel's back and dismantled something without even telling him it was happening. Had thought he was helping, and had been wrong, in a way that could not be corrected now, because Raymond Carter was 2 years in the ground. Daniel set the mugs on the counter harder than he meant to. "Are you okay?" Madison called from the living room. "Fine," he said. Mugs slipped. He took a breath. He thought about anger, and where it was useful, and where it wasn't. And he thought about a dead man and a phone call made 7 years ago out of a misguided love that had cost them both something they could never fully recover. And he thought about the fact that Lily existed, that this specific child was in the world because of every imperfect decision made by every imperfect person in this chain, and that the anger and the grief and the loss were all real and all true and also completely beside the point of what needed to happen now. He carried the mugs into the living room. Madison had shifted Lily to her lap and was looking at the baby with an expression Daniel recognized. He had worn it himself, in those first months with Emma, in the quiet moments when nobody was watching, when he'd let himself look at his daughter and feel the full weight of being responsible for something so completely dependent, so completely trusting, so completely unaware of how terrifying it was to be the person they were trusting. He sat down. He handed her the mug. She took it. "Your father," she said quietly. "Yeah. Are you going to be able to?" "I don't know yet," he said honestly. "I need some time with that one. But I need you to understand that whatever my father said, whatever he believed, his choices were not your choices. You still had the option to call me. I know. And you chose not to. I know. Daniel. And that is something we are going to have to actually deal with, he said. Not tonight, but it doesn't go away just because the situation is complicated. I'm not asking it to go away, she said. I came here to deal with it. He looked at her. Why now, he said. Why not a year ago? 6 months ago? Because Renee was the only person keeping me honest about it, Madison said. She told me every 6 months that I needed to call you. Every single time I had an excuse, and she would listen to the excuse, and then she would say, Madison, that's not a reason. That's a story. And then she died, and there was nobody left to call me on it. She wrapped both hands around the mug. And I picked up Lily one morning, about a week after the funeral, and I looked at her face, and I thought, I am becoming the story. I am the thing that happened to this child, before she was old enough to know anything was wrong. Daniel said nothing. I didn't want to be that, Madison said. Whatever else happens, whatever you decide, whatever this looks like from here, I'd not want to be the reason she grows up not knowing where she came from. The sound of small feet on the stairs stopped the conversation cold. Both of them turned. Emma was on the 4th step from the bottom. Owl pajamas, Gerald hanging from one hand, her hair sideways from sleep. She was looking at Madison with the particular expression of a child recalculating something she thought she already understood. You came back, Emma said. Madison blinked. Yes, you left this morning and you came back. Yes. Emma's eyes moved to the baby, then to her father, then back to Madison, with a precision that Daniel found slightly unnerving, given that she was 8 years old and had been asleep 40 minutes ago. Is everything okay? Emma asked, directing the question at her father. Everything's okay, Daniel said. Come here. Emma came down the rest of the stairs and crossed to him, and he put his arm around her, and she leaned into his side with the automatic, unself-conscious ease of a child who has been doing this her whole life. And she looked at Lily from this safe position, and then looked at Madison, and then looked at Daniel again. How come you look like that? She asked him. Like what? Like when you got that letter from Grandpa's lawyer, she said. Like you're doing a lot of math in your head. Daniel tightened his arm around her. I'm fine, Bug, he said. I'm just tired. Emma considered this answer with the same skepticism she applied to most adult explanations but chose, for reasons of her own, not to push on it. Is Madison staying again? She asked. Yes, Daniel said. Okay, Emma turned to Madison. Lily needs her sleep schedule. If she stays up too late, she's grumpy in the morning, and she makes that sound. I know, Madison said. And there was something in her voice that was almost a laugh, almost a sob, and landed somewhere between the two. You're right. I should get her down. I'll show you where the extra blankets are, Emma said, with enormous authority, and detached herself from Daniel and headed upstairs with the complete confidence of someone who has decided she is in charge of the practical matters. Madison stood. She looked at Daniel. She's extraordinary, she said quietly. She is, he said. A beat. She looks like you, Madison said. I know, he said. The way she figures things out. The way she just looks at a situation and moves through it. Madison. Sorry. Go put Lily down, he said. We can talk more tomorrow. Tonight we both need to stop adding information to this. She nodded. She took 2 steps toward the stairs and stopped. Daniel, she said, without turning around. Yeah. If you tell me to leave tomorrow, she said, I will leave. I want you to know I'm not here to take anything from you. Not ground, not peace, not whatever life you built. If this is too much, I understand, but I needed to bring her to you. Whatever comes after that is yours to decide. He looked at her back. At the way she was standing, that particular stillness of a person who has said the thing they came to say and is now waiting to find out what it cost them. Go put the baby down, he said. She went upstairs. Daniel sat alone in his living room for a long time. He didn't sleep. He sat in the chair in the living room.
After the house, Madison.
And he let himself think through all the things he hadn't been able to think through with Madison in the room. Because some thoughts need space and some truths need to be held privately before they can be handled publicly. He had a second daughter. He said it in his head a few times, testing the weight of it. He had a second daughter who was 4 months old and had his family's birthmark and had grabbed his finger without hesitation, the way babies grab things, without judgment, without precondition, just reaching for what was nearest. He thought about the ring. He had bought it 7 years ago from a small jeweler 2 towns over, had paid for it over 3 months in installments, had kept it in the inside pocket of his good jacket for 2 weeks, carrying it everywhere, waiting for the right evening. The evening he finally drove to her apartment, the neighbor had answered. Madison moved 3 days ago. No forwarding address. He had driven home. He had put the ring in the back of his sock drawer. He had not looked at it since. He got up. He went upstairs quietly, past the closed guest room door, where he could hear the soft, steady sound of Lily's breathing through the monitor Madison had set up on the hallway table. Past Emma's room, door half open, Gerald visible on the pillow beside her. He went to his bedroom. He opened the sock drawer. In the back, behind everything, in a small velvet pouch he hadn't touched in 7 years. The ring was exactly where he'd left it. He picked it up. He stood there holding it and thought about all the roads a single decision can close. All the futures that collapsed the night he knocked on that door and found a neighbor instead of Madison. Catherine, who he had met a year later, who had been good and kind and real, who had given him Emma and then left too soon, in a way that was no one's fault and everyone's grief. The years between then and now, the long, exhausting, rewarding, lonely work of being the only adult in a house that needed one. And now this. He put the ring back in the pouch. He put the pouch back in the drawer. He closed it. He was not ready to think about what it meant that he still had it. That was a question for a later version of himself. A version that had had more than 40 minutes to process the fact that his life had just changed shape again. What he was ready to think about was tomorrow. Tomorrow, Emma would wake up with questions. Tomorrow there were practical things to handle, because there were always practical things, and the practical things were where Daniel Carter was most comfortable, and comfort was what he needed right now. Tomorrow, he would call his lawyer friend Marcus, because the guardianship paperwork Madison had was complicated, and he needed someone who understood it to walk him through what his rights were, and what the timeline looked like, and what Lily needed in terms of documentation. Tomorrow, he would figure out how to tell an 8-year-old that the baby she had decided was her responsibility was also her sister. But tonight, standing in his dark bedroom listening to a house that was fuller than it had been in a long time, Daniel Carter made one decision. He was not going to run from this. He had run from exactly nothing in the last 4 years. Not from grief, not from the mortgage that had nearly broken him. The winter Emma was 4. Not from the diagnosis scare that turned out to be nothing, that he had handled, alone because there was no one else to handle it with. He had stood in every hard thing and come out the other side. Not because he was exceptional, but because standing was what you did when you were the only one standing. He had done it alone for 4 years. He did not have to do it alone now. He did not know what that meant yet. He did not know what Madison was to him now, or what he was to her, or what a future looked like that contained both of his daughters and the woman who had walked away with a secret and walked back with it 7 years later, rain-soaked and terrified, and more honest than she had ever been with him when they were young. He didn't know any of that, but he knew that tomorrow, when Emma asked her questions, he was going to answer them. And when the caseworker came to assess the stability of Lily's living situation, they were going to find a house with 2 adults and 2 children and enough room for all of it. And whatever came after that, they would figure out. At 5:45 in the morning, Daniel was in the kitchen when he heard the guest room door open. He heard Madison's footsteps, soft and careful, not wanting to wake anyone. He heard the sound of the bathroom, then footsteps again. And then she appeared in the kitchen doorway in an oversized sweatshirt and the same exhausted eyes she'd had last night. And she stopped when she saw him sitting at the table with a cup of coffee and the guardianship papers spread out in front of him. She looked at the papers. She looked at him. "You read them," she said. "I read them," he said. "Sit down." She came and sat. "The review is in 17 days," he said. "Yes." "The caseworker's name is Patricia Odom." "Yes, I want to call her today," he said. "I want to introduce myself as Lily's father. I want my name associated with this case before that review. Because the presence of a biological parent with a stable home is a different legal picture than a single guardian with temporary housing. Madison stared at him. Daniel, I looked it up last night, he said. I'm not a lawyer, but I'm not uninformed either. My name on this changes things. It demonstrates that Lily has family. Not just one person trying to handle something alone, but a family. You don't have to do this, she said. You keep saying that. Because it's true. Madison. He set the papers down and looked at her directly. She grabbed my finger last night. I know that's a reflex. I know babies do that. I don't care. She grabbed my finger, and I am not able to sit across from a situation I can fix and choose not to fix it. Because it's complicated. Madison's eyes were filling. Don't do that, he said, not unkindly. I'm not trying to, she said. I know. A silence. There's one more thing, he said. She waited. He reached across the table and turned to the third page of the documents, the one he'd marked with a post-it at 4 in the morning. It says here that Lily's father is listed as unknown, he said. Madison closed her eyes. I know, she said. We're going to fix that today, he said. She opened her eyes. He was looking at her steadily, without accusation, without the anger that was still there somewhere underneath, patient and waiting for its proper moment. Just steadily, the way a man looks at a problem he has decided to solve. Okay, she whispered. Okay, he said. He stood up and refilled his coffee, and brought the pot to the table and refilled hers without asking. Upstairs, Lily made a small sound. Just a sound. The sound of a person waking up and finding the world still there. And both of them looked up at the ceiling at the same moment. Listening, waiting. The sound didn't escalate. Lily settled back to sleep. Daniel sat back down. Madison wrapped both hands around her mug. Outside the window, the rain from last night had stopped, and the morning was coming up gray and clean, and somewhere a bird had decided it was late enough to start. They sat there in the early quiet, across from each other, with a stack of papers between them that were about to change the name on a document, and, in some way, neither of them could yet define the shape of everything that came after. Patricia Odom called back at 9:17 in the morning. Daniel had left the message at 7:45, which was the earliest he judged acceptable for leaving a voicemail to a government caseworker, and he had spent the intervening 90 minutes making breakfast, getting Emma ready for school, and not thinking about the phone, which meant he had thought about almost nothing else. He picked up on the first ring. Mr. Carter, Patricia Odom said. She had a voice that was professionally neutral, in the way of someone who had learned to hold it that way on purpose. I got your message. You said you're calling regarding Lily Brooks. That's right, Daniel said. I'm Lily's father. A pause. Short but present, Mr. Carter. I want to make sure I understand you correctly, she said. You're identifying yourself as the biological father of Lily Brooks, currently in the guardianship of Madison Brooks? Yes. And you're aware that the current documentation lists the father as unknown? I'm aware, he said. That's one of the reasons I'm calling. I want to correct that record. Another pause. Longer this time. Mr. Carter, I appreciate you reaching out. I have to be straightforward with you. A claim of paternity at this stage of the guardianship process requires verification. That means a DNA test, filed documentation, and a formal addendum to the existing case file. I understand, Daniel said. I'm prepared to do all of that. How quickly can we move? A beat. You're not asking me to slow this down, she said. It wasn't quite a question. No, Daniel said. I'm asking you to let me into it. There's a difference. Patricia Odom was quiet for a moment, in the way of someone recalibrating. The review is in 17 days, she said. I know, he said. I read the file. If we can establish paternity before the review, she said carefully, it does change the picture the panel sees. A child with one temporary guardian in unstable housing is a different case than a child with a confirmed biological parent and an established household. That's what I was hoping you'd say, Daniel said. Mr. Carter. Her voice shifted slightly, something underneath the professional neutral, loosening, just a fraction. Can I ask how long you've known about Lily? He looked across the kitchen to where Madison was feeding Lily in the chair by the window. The morning light, doing something uncomplicated to both of them. About 12 hours, he said. Patricia Odom let out a breath that was not quite a sigh, and not quite a laugh. "I'll send you the forms by end of day," she said. Emma found out at dinner. Daniel had spent most of the day deciding how to handle it, and had arrived at the conclusion that there was no good way to handle it. Only honest ways and dishonest ways. And Emma was 8 years old, and had been lied to by implication her entire life about things that had nothing to do with her, and he was not going to extend that record. He waited until the plates were cleared, and Emma had Gerald on the table, which was technically against the rules, but which he let slide on the grounds that this was not a normal evening, and Gerald's presence seemed to stabilize Emma's processing. "I need to tell you something," Daniel said. Emma looked at him. "Something happened last night that I should explain." "About Madison?" Emma asked immediately. "About Madison and Lily, yes." Emma's eyes moved to Lily, who was in the bouncer's seat at the end of the table, systematically attempting to fit her entire fist into her mouth. "Lily is my daughter," Daniel said. Emma looked at him. "Your daughter," she said. "Yes, like." Emma stopped. "Tried again. Like how I'm your daughter?" "Yes." Emma looked at Madison. Madison held Emma's gaze steadily. She didn't look away, and she didn't try to explain, and she didn't apologize with her face, which Daniel thought took courage. "So she's my sister," Emma said. "She's your half-sister, technically, Dad." Emma's voice was very flat. "Is she my sister or not?" He looked at his daughter. "Yes," he said, "she is." Emma turned back to Lily. Lily had successfully gotten her fist most of the way into her mouth and appeared extremely satisfied about it. Emma watched her for a long moment. Then she turned to Daniel. "Why didn't you tell me this morning?" "Because I needed to think through how to explain it." "Did you know this morning?" "Yes." "So you knew all day and didn't tell me." "Emma, Dad, I talked to her all day. I taught her a song. I talked to her like she was just." Emma stopped. Her jaw was tight in the way Daniel recognized as the precursor to tears that she was not going to let herself cry. "I would have talked to her differently if I had known." "How would you have talked to her differently?" he asked. Emma thought about that. The tightness in her jaw eased slightly. "I don't know," she admitted. "Maybe the same. But I would have known while I was doing it." Daniel nodded. "You're right," he said. "I should have told you this morning. I'm sorry." Emma looked at him with the particular expression she wore when an apology landed, and she was deciding what to do with it. Then she got up from her chair, walked to the bouncer seat, and crouched down in front of Lily. "Hi," she said, very seriously. Lily stopped examining her fist and looked at Emma. "I'm your sister," Emma said. "My name is Emma. That's Gerald." She held up the elephant. "You're going to know us for your whole life. That's a long time. So we better start now." Lily reached for Gerald. Emma let her touch the elephant's ear. Daniel looked at Madison across the table, and Madison looked at Daniel. And neither of them said anything, because there was nothing that needed saying. The DNA testing appointment was the next morning, 8:30, at a lab 40 minutes from the house. Madison sat in the passenger seat and Daniel drove, and nobody talked for the first 15 minutes. Which was not uncomfortable exactly, but was the kind of quiet that has weight in it. The kind where both people are aware of the silence and choosing it deliberately. It was Madison who broke it. "I called my attorney last night," she said. "Okay," Daniel said. She said the same thing Patricia Odom said, that a confirmed biological parent with stable housing substantially improves the picture. She also said. Madison paused. She said that if you file for co-guardianship before the review, it essentially removes the housing issue from the table. The panel would be reviewing a two-parent household, not a single guardian in transition. Daniel's hands were steady on the wheel. "Co-guardianship," he said. "I'm not asking you to do that," Madison said quickly. "I'm just telling you what she said." "I know the difference between information and a request," he said. "I know you do. What does your attorney think our chances are if we don't file?" Madison was quiet for a moment. 60-40, she said. "In our favor. But not comfortable. And if we file," she said 95%, "because it becomes almost impossible to argue that a child with two engaged biological parents in a stable home is better served by strangers." Daniel drove. "You should have been a lawyer," he said. "I considered it," Madison said. "Too much arguing." You argued with me constantly when we were 24. That was different. That was personal. Professional arguing is different. How? You can't cry in professional arguing, she said. It's frowned upon. He glanced at her. She was looking out the window, and the corner of her mouth was doing something that was almost a smile. Did you cry in arguments with me? He asked. Daniel, I'm not answering that. You did, he said. I remember one time. I was not crying, she said. I had something in my eye. It was February, he said. Both eyes. She turned to look at him. He kept his eyes on the road, but the thing that was happening to his own mouth was not something he could fully control. You're laughing, she said. I'm driving, he said. You're doing both, she said. He was. The laughter faded. But the ease of it remained, and that was somehow more significant than the laughter itself. The ease of a joke that landed between two people who knew each other well enough to find the same things funny, which was not something you built in a day or recovered in one either. The lab was efficient and clinical, and took 40 minutes for something that would change the official record permanently. Daniel rolled up his sleeve and let the technician take the swab and signed the forms and list his name where it was supposed to go. And then he and Madison sat in plastic chairs in a waiting area with a television in the corner, playing a morning talk show with the sound off, and waited for the paperwork to be processed. Can I ask you something? Madison said. Go ahead. Last night after I went upstairs, what did you do? He thought about the sock drawer, the velvet pouch, the ring. Sat up for a while, he said. Thought things through. Were you angry? Yes. Are you still? He considered the coquette way he'd considered it the night before. Seriously, and without shortcuts. At the situation, he said. At my father, which is a complicated place to put anger because he's not here to receive it. At the 7 years. At the specific choices that got made without me. He looked at his hands. Less at you than I probably should be. Why less than you should be? Because you made wrong decisions for reasons that made sense to you at the time, he said. And because that baby grabbed my finger last night. It's hard to sustain a clean anger when you're also looking at the thing that exists because of all the wrong decisions. She's not a mistake. She's just here. And she deserves better than her father, spending her first months being furious. Madison looked at him for a long time. You have become, she said slowly, a genuinely different person than the man I left. Most people do, he said, given enough time and enough necessity. I don't mean it as a criticism. I know, I mean it as. She stopped, looked for the word. Recognition. I'm recognizing someone I didn't know I was going to meet. Daniel looked at her. Who did you think you were going to meet? He said. I don't know, she said. Someone angrier, maybe. Someone who opened the door and said, no immediately. Someone who made this hard. It is hard, he said. Not in the way I expected, she said. He held her gaze for a moment, then looked back at the silent television. Madison, he said. Yeah. Don't do that yet, he said quietly. She didn't ask what he meant. She knew what he meant. Okay, she said. There's too much unresolved, he said. Too much that we still have to get through before we start looking at each other like that. I know, she said. You're right. I'm not saying never, he said. I'm saying not yet. A beat. Okay, she said again. Differently this time. Not an acknowledgement. Something closer to a decision. The call came on Thursday. Daniel was at work, 3 days after the DNA test. Elbow deep in a transmission rebuild. When his phone went off in his shirt pocket, he saw Patricia Odom's number and stepped outside without finishing the sentence he'd been saying to his coworker. Mr. Carter, she said, I have the preliminary results. Already? The standard processing time was 5 to 7 business days. We expedited given the timeline, she said. Mr. Carter, the test confirms paternity. He leaned against the wall of the garage. Okay, he said. I've filed the addendum to the case. Your name is now on the record. I've also reviewed the co-guardianship filing that your attorney submitted this morning. And I want to be honest with you, Patricia Odom said. The panel review is in 14 days. The co-guardianship filing changes the picture significantly. But there is a complication I need to make you aware of. He straightened. The couple who expressed interest in Lily, she said. Richard and Diane Holt. They've filed a formal petition. The transmission job suddenly felt very far away. When, he said. Yesterday morning, she said. Before your filing came through. It was close, Mr. Carter, but their petition preceded yours by approximately 6 hours. What does that mean legally, he said. It means both petitions go to the panel, she said. It means the review is now contested. Your filing doesn't automatically take precedence over theirs, simply by virtue of biological relationship. Not in this state, not at this stage. The panel will weigh what is in the best interest of the child. I'm her father, Daniel said. You are, she said, and that carries substantial weight. But the Holts are licensed foster parents with 7 years of experience, an established home, and a documented support network. Their attorney will argue that continuity and stability are in Lily's best interest. Lily has been alive for 4 months, Daniel said. She has not had 7 years with this couple. She has had 4 months with Madison. I know, Patricia Odom said. I want you to win this, Mr. Carter. I'm telling you this because I want you prepared, not because I think you can't, but you need a very good attorney in that room in 14 days. He pushed off the wall. Thank you for telling me, he said. Mr. Carter. She paused. For what it's worth. From what I've seen. That little girl is where she belongs. He hung up. He stood outside the garage in the cold air and thought about Richard and Diane Holt, 2 people he had never met, and the 6-hour window that separated their claim from his, and what it meant that the world could be this precisely, painfully close. He called Marcus Reeves before he went back inside. Marcus had been his friend since college, had become an attorney without losing the quality that made him worth keeping as a friend, which was that he said exactly what he thought without dressing it up. Tell me everything, Marcus said. Daniel told him everything. There was a silence when he finished. 6 hours, Marcus said. 6 hours. That's a bad 6 hours, Daniel. I know. Okay, he heard Marcus's chair creak. Biological parent claims are strong but not automatic in contested guardianship cases in Ohio. The court applies the best interest standard, which means they're going to look at everything. Stability of home, support network, financial situation, relationship between the child and each party, emotional readiness. He paused. How long has Madison been in your house? 3 weeks. And the child? 3 weeks. So you have 3 weeks of documented cohabitation, Marcus said. The Holts have 0. That actually matters. The child knows Madison. The child knows your home. Disruption is a factor the panel weighs. Can we win this? Daniel asked. With the right preparation, yes, Marcus said. But I need to be in that room. And I need to meet Madison. And I need to see the house. And I need to understand the full picture before I walk in there. When? This weekend, Marcus said. Can you do that? Yes, Daniel said. Daniel, Marcus's voice changed slightly. Is this woman Madison, is she on the same page as you about what this looks like? He thought about the kitchen table at 5:45 in the morning. The papers. The coffee. Yes, he said. Because the panel is going to look at the 2 of you as a unit, Marcus said. Not as individuals. They're going to ask whether this is a stable, coherent family situation, or 2 people who met again last week and are stitching something together under pressure. Then we better make sure they see the right thing, Daniel said. That's not what I'm saying, Marcus said. I know what you're saying. What am I saying? You're saying it needs to be real, Daniel said. Not performed. Yes, Marcus said. That's what I'm saying. Daniel went back inside. He picked up his tools. He finished the transmission. He told Madison that night, after Emma was in bed. He sat down across from her at the kitchen table. Same seats they had occupied at 5:45 in the morning, 3 days ago. And he told her about the Holts, and the 6 hours, and Marcus, and the 14 days. Madison listened without interrupting. When he finished, the kitchen was very quiet. Richard and Diane Holt, she said. That's the name she gave me. I know who they are, Madison said. He stared at her. You know them. I've met them once, she said. At the agency, when I was doing the initial guardianship paperwork. They were there for something else. We sat in the same waiting room for about 20 minutes. She looked at the table. They seemed kind, organized. They had a folder with tabs. Madison. I'm not saying I want them to have her, she said. And her voice finally showed the first crack of real fear, the fear she'd been holding back since he started talking. I'm telling you what I know. They're not monsters. They're people who want a child and saw an opportunity and made a move. Her hands were flat on the table, which means we have to make a better one. We are, he said. Marcus is good. The co-guardianship filing is strong. 3 weeks in this house is evidence. Is it enough? She said. He looked at her. Tell me the truth, she said. I can handle the truth. What I can't handle is being managed. I don't know if it's enough, he said. Marcus thinks yes. Patricia Odom thinks yes. I think yes. But I don't know. Madison nodded. She looked at her hands. Renee would have something to say about this, she said quietly. She had something to say about everything. That was annoying, and I miss it every single day. What do you think she'd say about this, specifically? Madison looked up. She'd say, stop looking at what you're afraid of losing and start looking at what you're fighting to keep. She paused. And then she'd tell me my hair looked terrible and offer to fix it, because that's how she transitioned between serious and practical. Daniel said nothing. She would have liked you, Madison said. She would have approved of this. Of you doing this. Her voice went careful around the edges. She was the one who kept saying your name. For 7 years, whenever I was making an excuse, she would say, Daniel Carter, Daniel Carter, Daniel Carter. Like saying it enough times would make me do the right thing faster. She was right, he said. She usually was, Madison said. It was exhausting. Saturday came and Marcus came with it. He was a tall man with reading glasses he perpetually forgot he was wearing. And the comfortable authority of someone who had been in more difficult rooms than the one he was currently standing in. He shook Daniel's hand, shook Madison's hand, looked at Lily in the bouncer seat, and said, She's got your jawline, Daniel, which will look better on her in 30 years than it does on you now. Emma, who had been watching from the doorway, said, That's true. Marcus turned to Emma. And you are? Emma Carter, Emma said. I'm 8. I'm Lily's sister. Are you the lawyer? I am, Marcus said. Good, Emma said. Because those other people aren't getting my sister. Marcus looked at Daniel. Daniel looked at the ceiling. She does that, he said. They sat at the kitchen table for 2 hours. Marcus asked questions, wrote things down, asked follow-up questions, wrote more things down, and periodically looked around the kitchen with the careful attention of someone cataloging details. He asked about the house, the neighborhood, Emma's school, Daniel's income, Madison's employment status, her counseling work, her history with Lily, the timeline of her arrival, the relationship between Emma and Lily. He asked everything. And then he closed his notebook and looked at both of them across the table. I'm going to be direct, he said. Please, Madison said. The biological father claim is strong, Marcus said. The home situation is solid. Emma's attachment to Lily is significant and documentable. Madison's existing relationship with Lily is the strongest single factor in your favor because it represents continuity of care. He paused. The Holtz's attorney will argue that a recently established household of 2 who have not been in a relationship for 7 years and who only reconnected 3 weeks ago represents instability, not stability. Daniel said nothing. They'll make the argument that what you have here is situational, Marcus said. 2 people thrown together by circumstance who have not demonstrated a sustained commitment to one another. What do we say to that? Madison asked. Marcus looked at her, then at Daniel. You tell the truth, he said, which is that you are 2 people with a history, with a child together, who made mistakes and are correcting them. That is not instability. That is exactly what the best interest standard is designed to support a child, being raised by her biological parents in a functioning household. We haven't been a couple for 7 years, Daniel said. Are you a couple now? Marcus asked. Daniel looked at Madison. Madison looked at Daniel. We're figuring that out, Daniel said. Marcus made a sound. Figure it out before the 14th, he said. The thing no one had anticipated came on a Wednesday, 9 days before the review, when Madison's phone rang at 6 in the morning, while Daniel was making coffee, and Emma was still asleep, and Lily was in the bouncer seat tracking the ceiling fan. Madison looked at the number. Her face changed. Who is it? Daniel asked. She didn't answer immediately. She just looked at the phone. And the expression on her face was the one he was learning to read, the one that meant something that she had not prepared for. "It's Diane Holt," she said. Daniel set the coffee pot down. "Don't answer it," he said. "Daniel, Madison, call Marcus first. It might be important," she said. "It is definitely important. That's exactly why you call Marcus first." She looked at him. The phone rang again. "She's the one trying to take Lily," he said, and his voice was flat and quiet in the way that meant he was not calm, only controlled. "Whatever she is calling to say, whatever she wants you to hear, Marcus needs to be on the line first." Madison put the phone face down on the table. It rang once more and stopped. 2 minutes later, there was a voicemail. Madison played it on speaker. Diane Holt's voice was exactly what Madison had said she was kind-sounding. Organized, the kind of voice that belonged to someone who used words carefully. She said she was calling because she wanted to talk directly, person to person, not through attorneys. She said she understood Madison's position and respected it. She said she and Richard were not trying to hurt anyone. She said she thought it might help to have a conversation before the hearing. She said she had something Madison needed to know. Daniel looked at Madison when the message ended. "Call Marcus," he said. Madison was already dialing. Marcus picked up on the second ring, which at 6 in the morning meant he had either been awake already or was a man with exceptional reflexes. He listened to the voicemail twice. He was quiet for a moment. "Don't call her back," he said. "Not until I know what she means by something you need to know." That phrase in that context, from that party, is not goodwill. It's leverage. "What kind of leverage?" Daniel said. "That's what I need to find out," Marcus said. "Give me today. Don't make any calls. Don't respond to anything. And if she calls again, let it go to voicemail." He hung up. Daniel looked at Madison across the table. Lily made a sound. They both looked at her. She was done with the ceiling fan and had moved on to studying her own hands, turning them in front of her face with the grave concentration of a scientist encountering something unprecedented. "What does she know?" Madison said. It wasn't a question directed at him, more like the beginning of a thought spoken out loud. "I don't know," Daniel said. "Something from Portland." "Maybe," she said. "Something from the agency. Something about the original documentation." She was going through it methodically, the way she'd go through a client's case history. "Or something about me. My employment record, my housing history." "Stop," Daniel said. She looked at him. "You're doing the thing where you build the worst version of the story before you know what story you're in," he said. She stopped. "How do you know I do that?" she said. "Because I watched you do it for 3 weeks," he said. "Every time something complicated comes up, you go immediately to the worst interpretation and start planning for it. That's called being prepared. It's called being afraid," he said. "And I understand why. But right now, before we know what she has, we are not going to catastrophize." Madison looked at him. "Okay," she said, after a moment. "Okay." He poured the coffee. He set a cup in front of her. Outside, the morning was doing what mornings do in October, coming up cold and colorless, the trees having given up most of what they'd been holding. Upstairs, Emma's alarm went off, and in the bouncer seat, Lily looked up at the ceiling fan, reconsidered the situation, and broke into a smile so sudden and complete that both of them saw it at the same moment, and both of them stopped everything they were doing. It was her first real smile, not gas, not a reflex, a real one, directed at the ceiling fan that had been her companion and her mystery since the day she arrived. Daniel looked at that smile and thought about 14 days and the Holts and leverage and Marcus and all the machinery of risk that was moving around this child. And then he looked at the smile again and thought about what he'd said to Madison. Stop building the worst version. He reached out and put his hand over Madison's hand on the table. She looked down at his hand. She didn't move. Neither did he. "We're going to be okay," he said. He didn't know if that was true yet, but he knew that Lily was smiling at a ceiling fan in his kitchen, and Emma was about to come out with Gerald and a list of questions, and the coffee was hot, and the morning was moving, and some things were still simple enough to hold on to. That was enough for right now. Marcus called back at 4 in the afternoon. Daniel was in the garage underneath a truck when his phone buzzed on the floor beside him. He rolled out, saw Marcus's number, and answered before the second ring finished. "Talk to me," he said. "I found out what she has," Marcus said. Daniel sat up. "There's a notation in Lily's original case file," Marcus said. "From the hospital, the night Renee died. When Madison arrived at the emergency room, the notation says she was in an agitated state, that she raised her voice at a staff member, that security was called as a precaution." Daniel said nothing. Nobody was removed, nobody was arrested. Madison was grieving and she got loud in a hospital hallway, which is something approximately every human being on the planet has done at some point. But it's in the file, and the Holtz's attorney found it. "They're going to use it," Daniel said. "They're going to try to use it," Marcus said. "They're going to frame it as an episode of emotional instability and argue it's a pattern." "It's not a pattern," Daniel said. "It's a woman who just lost her sister. I know that. You know that. The question is whether the panel knows that, and the answer to that depends entirely on how we present it." Marcus paused. "I need to talk to Madison tonight. I need to know exactly what happened in that hospital. Every detail. Because if their attorney surprises her with it in that room, it cannot be the first time she's had to explain it." "I'll tell her," Daniel said. "Daniel." Marcus's voice dropped a register. "How is she?" He thought about Madison's hand under his on the kitchen table, the way she hadn't moved. "Handling it," he said. "She needs to be more than handling it by the 14th, Marcus said. She needs to walk into that room like a woman who has already decided she's walking out with her daughter." "I'll tell her," Daniel said again. He hung up. He sat on the garage floor for a moment, back against the truck, and thought about a woman raising her voice in a hospital hallway on the worst night of her life, and the fact that somewhere in a file cabinet someone had written it down, and the fact that two strangers with a folder full of tabs had found it and decided to use it. He got up. He went home. Madison already knew. He could tell the second he walked through the door. She was standing at the kitchen counter with her phone in her hand and her jaw set and Lily on her hip, and she looked at him when he came in with the expression of someone who has been waiting for a specific conversation and is ready to have it. "Marcus called you first," she said. "He called me because I was easier to reach," Daniel said. "He wants to come over tonight." "I know. He called me after." She put her phone on the counter. "I'm going to need you to not look at me like that." "Like what?" "Like you're deciding whether I'm fragile," she said. "I'm not fragile. I was 28 years old, and I had just watched my sister stop breathing, and someone in a blue uniform told me I needed to lower my voice. And I told them that I would lower my voice when my sister was alive again." Her chin was up. Her eyes were clear. "I'm not ashamed of that. I'm not asking you to be," he said. "Good," she said, "because I'm not going to be." He looked at her. "I know," he said quietly. "You were right to be angry. What they did with that notation is what's wrong, not what you did in that hallway." Some of the rigidity in her shoulders eased. "Their attorney is good," she said. "Marcus is better," he said. "You don't know that." "I know Marcus," he said. "I've known him for 14 years. I have watched him walk into rooms that looked like losses and walk out with something different. He's better." Madison looked at him for a moment. Then Lily reached up and grabbed a fistful of Madison's hair and pulled, with the cheerful purposefulness of a baby who has discovered cause and effect and finds it tremendously entertaining. "Madison winced," she said. "We've discussed this." Lily pulled harder. Daniel stepped forward and gently detached the small fist from Madison's hair, and for a moment his hand was over Madison's, and they were both holding Lily's hand. And the three of them were very close together in the kitchen, in a way that had not been planned and was not performed. Lily looked between them with enormous satisfaction, as if this was precisely the outcome she had been engineering. "She did that on purpose," Madison said. "She's 5 months old," Daniel said. "I know. She still did it on purpose." He stepped back, but the closeness stayed in the room for a moment before it faded. Marcus arrived at 7. Emma had been put to bed with a minimum of negotiation, which Daniel recognized as Emma choosing her battles wisely, because she had looked at Marcus's face when he came through the door and understood without being told that the adults needed the table. "Tonight," Marcus sat across from Madison and put a recorder on the table. "I want you to tell me exactly what happened," he said. "From the moment you got the call about Renee to the moment you left the hospital. Don't edit. Don't decide what's relevant. Just tell me," Madison told him. She told it the same way she'd told Daniel about Portland, in the flat, worn voice of a story that had been lived through rather than constructed. And Daniel sat beside her and listened to hadn't heard het and watched Marcus's face, which gave nothing away. She told him about the call at 11:40 at night, about the drive to the hospital, 40 minutes that she remembered in fragments, the interstate, the radio, turning the radio off, the parking garage, about the nurse at the desk, who told her Renee was gone before Madison had even finished saying her sister's name, about the hallway, about the security guard named Kevin, who she remembered because he had been young and nervous, and clearly wished he were somewhere else, about what she said to Kevin, about what Kevin said back, about what she said after that. When she finished, Marcus was quiet for a moment. "You said," he said, looking at his notes, "you can call whoever you want. She was my sister. She was the only person I had." "Yes," Madison said. "And Kevin said?" "He said he understood, but I needed to come with him. And then I went with him," Madison said. "I sat in a room for about 20 minutes, and a social worker came in, and I apologized, and she said it was all right, and that was the end of it." "No paperwork filed against you?" "No. No formal incident report beyond the notation. Not that I know of." Marcus wrote something down. "Okay," he said. "Here's how we handle this. Their attorney is going to present that notation as evidence of emotional volatility. I'm going to get ahead of it. I'm going to present it myself, before they do, as evidence of the depth of Madison's commitment to her family. A woman who has never had a single disciplinary notation in her professional life, who has no record, no history of instability, who, on the worst night of her life, in the worst moment of grief she has ever experienced, raised her voice in a hallway, and then immediately complied and apologized." He looked at Madison steadily. "That's not a liability. That's a human being, and I will make the panel see the difference." Madison looked at him. "Will it work?" she said. "It will work better than letting them present it first," Marcus said. "Context is everything in that room. If the panel hears about the hospital from their attorney, it sounds like a secret. If they hear it from me, it sounds like honesty. And if it still goes against us," Madison said. Marcus set his pen down. "Madison," he said, "I need you to believe that it won't." "That's not an answer," she said. "No," he said, "it's a strategy. There's a difference." He picked up the recorder. "I'll see you both in 8 days. 8 days is a long time when you are waiting for something, and a very short time when you are trying to build something." In those 8 days, Daniel learned things about Madison that he hadn't known when they were together at 24. Because you don't know a person when they are young in the same way you know them when they have been through things. He learned that she talked to Lily constantly, a running narration of everything she was doing. Not because a book told her to, but because she genuinely seemed to want Lily to understand the world as soon as possible. He learned that she kept a legal pad on the nightstand and wrote down anything she needed to remember at 3 in the morning, rather than trusting herself to hold it until morning. He learned that she ate, standing at the counter, when she was preoccupied, forgetting to sit down, and that Emma, who had observed this pattern with great interest, had taken to pulling out Madison's chair at meals with pointed hospitality. He learned that she cried once, only once in 8 days, and it was not when she thought anyone could hear her. It was at 2 in the morning, and he was getting water from the kitchen, and the guest room door was not quite closed, and the sound was quiet and brief. The sound of someone allowing themselves 3 minutes of something before locking it back up. He stood in the hallway. He did not knock. He got his water and went back to bed and stared at the ceiling and thought about what it costs a person to grieve a sister and fight a legal battle and navigate a past and do all of it while holding a baby. And he thought about what it meant that she allowed herself exactly 3 minutes and not one more. The next morning he came downstairs and she was at the table with the legal pad and a cup of coffee and Lily in her lap. And she looked up at him with the clear, composed face she wore in the mornings and said, "Emma left her permission slip on the counter. It's due today. Got it, he said. He got the permission slip. He signed it. He put it in Emma's backpack. He poured his coffee. And neither of them said anything about 2 in the morning. Because some things don't need to be named to be understood. The call that changed everything came 6 days before the review. Not from Marcus. Not from Patricia Odom. But from a number Daniel didn't recognize. With an area code he had to look up. Portland, Oregon. He answered it. Is this Daniel Carter? A man's voice. Older. Measured. Who's asking? My name is Gerald Whitmore, the man said. I'm a retired family court judge. I was a friend of Renee Brooks. She contacted me about 8 months ago regarding her sister's situation. Daniel was very still. She contacted you, he said. She did. Renee was a thorough person. She told me that Madison had a child whose father didn't know about her, and that when the time came, she wanted there to be someone who could speak to Madison's character, to Lily's origins, to the circumstances. He paused. Renee told me she had a feeling the time would come sooner than anyone wanted it to. She was right about that. Why are you calling me? Daniel said. Because Renee left me your name, Gerald Whitmore said. She said that if anything happened to her, and if Madison couldn't figure out how to do this herself, I should call Daniel Carter and tell him that Renee Brooks considered him the right answer to a question Madison had been asking for 7 years. Daniel sat down. She knew about me, he said. Renee knew everything, the man said. That was just how she was. She said, Madison loved you from the day she left and never stopped and was too stubborn and too scared to fix it. And that Lily deserved to know her father. And that if Renee wasn't around to push Madison in the right direction, she hoped you'd figure it out between you. The kitchen was completely silent. Lily was asleep upstairs. Emma was at school. Madison had gone to her follow-up appointment with her attorney and would be back in an hour. Daniel sat alone at the table and held the phone and listened to a dead woman's voice reaching him through a stranger. Doing what she had apparently been planning to do for 8 months. Just in case, Mr. Whitmore, he said. Would you be willing to speak to our attorney? That's why I called, the man said simply. Marcus's reaction, when Daniel called him, was a silence of approximately 4 seconds, followed by, Say that again. Daniel said it again. A retired family court judge, Marcus said, with a statement from Renee about Madison's character and the circumstances of Lily's birth. Prepared 8 months ago. Yes. Another silence. Daniel, Marcus said, and his voice had something in it that was not quite professional neutrality. Do you understand what this does to their case? Tell me. Their entire argument is that Madison is an unstable single guardian with a recent emotional incident and a dubious household situation. A statement from a retired family court judge, prepared in advance by the deceased guardian who knew this situation better than anyone, that directly addresses Madison's character and the deliberate, thoughtful nature of her decisions regarding Lily. He stopped. It doesn't just counter their narrative. It replaces it. Can you use it in time? I can have it filed by tomorrow morning, Marcus said. Get me Whitmore's number now. Daniel gave him the number. He hung up. He sat at the table and thought about Renee Brooks, who he had never met, who had died at 31 and left behind a baby and a sister and a retired judge and a plan. And he thought about the particular kind of love that makes you prepare for your own absence, that makes you set things in motion for other people while you still can. He thought about what kind of sister does that. He thought about what Madison had lost.
When Madison came home 40 minutes later, she opened the door and saw him sitting at the table.
And she stopped. What happened? She said immediately. Sit down, he said. Daniel. It's good, he said. Sit down. It's good news. She sat. He told her about Gerald Whitmore. He watched her face move through 3 things in rapid succession. Confusion, recognition, and then something that broke open completely. Not grief, not relief, but both at once. The way a door feels when it has been locked for a long time and finally gives. She called him, Madison said. She actually called him. 8 months ago. Madison pressed both hands over her mouth. She told me she had a plan, Madison said, the words coming through her hands. 6 months before she died, she said, I have a plan. Madison, don't worry about it. I thought she meant the guardianship paperwork. I thought she meant the logistics. She took her hands away from her face. She meant this. She was planning in case she wasn't here. She was, Daniel said. That is the most Renee thing I have ever heard in my life, Madison said. And she laughed. And it was not a clean laugh. It had tears running through the edges of it. But it was real, and it was full, and it filled the kitchen completely. She always had to have the last word. Even dead, she has the last word. Daniel reached across the table. She took his hand. This time neither of them noted it or stepped back from it. 2 days before the review, Emma made a presentation. This was not requested or anticipated. It was Emma's own initiative, executed with the preparation of someone who had been thinking about it for longer than anyone knew. She came downstairs after dinner with a set of poster boards she had apparently been working on in her room for the better part of a week. On it, in Emma's handwriting, which was large and confident and occasionally spelled things phonetically, was a timeline. At the top it said why Lily belongs here. Beneath that, in chronological order, was a list. Not bullet points. Paragraphs. Emma's paragraphs. Written in the voice of a child who had decided something important and wanted it documented. The first entry said, October 3rd. Lily slept through the night for the first time in this house. She knows the sounds here. The second said, October 7th. Lily smiled at the ceiling fan. This is her ceiling fan now. The third said, October 11th. Lily grabbed my finger the same way she grabbed Dad's finger. She trusts us. There were 11 entries. The last one said, Lily doesn't know what a courtroom is. She doesn't know there are people who want to take her somewhere she's never been. She only knows this house. This is the only home she has ever known. If you move her, she won't understand why. That is not fair to her. Madison read it, standing at the kitchen counter. She read it once. Then she read it again. Then she put it down very carefully and looked at Emma, who was watching her, with the expression of someone who has made their argument and is waiting for the verdict. Emma, Madison said. I know I can't bring it to the actual hearing, Emma said. Marcus told me it doesn't work that way. But I thought it might help you remember what you're fighting for. Madison crossed the kitchen and put her arms around Emma Carter, who was 8 years old and had decided without being asked that Lily was hers. And Emma let herself be hugged with the slightly stiff tolerance of a child who considers herself too old for this but makes exceptions for important occasions. Daniel stood in the doorway and watched and felt something settle in his chest, quiet and permanent like a foundation, finding level ground. The night before the review, Daniel found Madison sitting on the front porch steps. It was cold. She had a blanket around her shoulders and her hands wrapped around a mug, and she was looking at the street with the expression of someone who has gone through the scenario enough times that they've stopped being surprised by it and started just sitting with it. He sat down beside her. She handed him the mug without asking. He took a sip. Are you ready? He said. No, she said. Are you? No, he said. Good, she said. I'd be suspicious of ready right now. They sat. Down the street, a car passed, its headlights sweeping through the dark. Daniel, she said. Yeah, if something goes wrong tomorrow. If it doesn't go the way Marcus thinks it will. She stopped. Started again. I need you to know that what you did, calling Patricia Odom, filing the paperwork, standing in that room with Marcus, what you've done these past weeks. She turned to look at him. I would never have asked you for any of it. And you did all of it anyway. You didn't ask, because you don't know how to ask, he said. We've established that. I'm working on it. I know you are. I mean it, Daniel. Whatever happens tomorrow, you gave Lily a father. Even if the worst happens. She has a name on a document now. She has a history. She has you. Nobody can take that back. He looked at her. Nothing bad is going to happen tomorrow, he said. You don't know that. No, he said. But I know Marcus. And I know what we've built in this house. And I know that Emma made a poster that would make a federal judge question their life choices. He paused. The Holts are good people who want a child. But Lily already has a family. That's a different thing. And tomorrow we're going to walk into that room and show 12 people the difference. Madison looked at him for a long time. The night was cold, and the street was quiet, and somewhere inside the house, Lily was sleeping in the room that had become her room. The one with the ceiling fan, she had decided, was a living creature. The one that had heard her first real cry, and her first real laugh, and her first real smile. The room that smelled like her now, that had shaped itself around her presence, the way rooms do when someone belongs in them. "You should get some sleep," Daniel said. "So should you," she said. Neither of them moved. "Daniel," she said after a while. "Yeah. When this is over," she said. "When Lily is safe and the papers are filed and the Holts have gone back to their life, what happens to us?" He was quiet for a moment. "I think," he said slowly, "we find out who we are now, not who we were at 24. Not the people who hurt each other by trying to protect each other. The people we actually are. And if you don't like who I am now," he turned to look at her. "Madison," he said, "I have watched you fight for that baby for 3 weeks on no sleep, in a house that wasn't yours, in a situation you never planned for, without once asking for more than you needed. I have watched you love Emma without trying to be anything to her except exactly what you are. I have watched you hold your grief with one hand and Lily with the other and never set either one down." He held her gaze. "I like who you are now just fine." Her eyes were bright. "Don't," he said. "I'm not," she said. "Both eyes," he said. "I have something in them," she said. "It's October," he said. "Clear night." She made a sound that was approximately half laugh. He stood up. He held out his hand. She took it and stood, and he held her hand for 1 moment longer than was strictly necessary for the standing up, and then they went inside. The house was quiet. Emma was asleep with Gerald on her pillow. Lily was asleep with the nightlight on, the small glow of it catching the mobile above the crib that Daniel had put together himself one Saturday morning while Madison was at her attorney's office, following the instructions twice because he'd done it wrong the first time, which he had not mentioned to anyone. Daniel stood in the doorway of Lily's room. He looked at her. 4 months old. Born in Portland on a rainy Tuesday. Named for Renee. Carrying a birthmark that his mother would have recognized instantly. His daughter. Tomorrow was tomorrow. But tonight she was sleeping in her room, in her house, with her family on the other side of 2 walls. And the ceiling fan was still, and the night light was on. And she was breathing the slow and absolute breath of a child who has no idea that the world is complicated, who only knows that when she wakes up, someone she trusts will be there. He pulled the door to. He went to bed. He slept. Daniel woke at 4:50 in the morning without an alarm. He lay still for a moment, listening to the house. Lily's monitor on the nightstand was quiet. Emma's room was quiet. The guest room was quiet. Everything was exactly as it had been when he fell asleep, and he had still woken up at 4:50 because his body understood what his mind was trying not to obsess over, which was that in 5 hours he was going to be sitting in a room where someone else would stayed with her family. He got up, he made coffee. He sat at the kitchen table in the dark and drank it, and did not look at the chair where Madison usually sat, because looking at empty chairs at 5 in the morning was not a productive activity. At 5:15, the guest room door opened. Madison came into the kitchen in a gray sweatshirt, hair pulled back, and stopped when she saw him. "You too," she said. "Yeah," he said. She poured herself a cup and sat across from him, and they both drank their coffee in the dark and didn't say anything, because there was nothing left to say that hadn't already been said. And sometimes the most honest thing two people can do is sit together, in the quiet, and let come on them at whatever speed it intends to come. At 5:40, Lily woke up. Madison went to get her. She came back with Lily on her hip, the baby blinking in the kitchen light with the severe expression she wore every morning. The one that suggested she found the concept of waking up personally offensive. Daniel held out his arms. Madison handed Lily over without discussion. Daniel held his younger daughter in the kitchen in the early morning and felt her slowly relax to him the way she did now. The particular surrender of a baby who has decided a person is safe. And he thought about 4 months of her life that he had not been present for, and decided, not for the first time and not for the last, that he was not going to spend the rest of her life mourning the part he missed. He was going to be here for what came next. That was all he could do. That was enough. Marcus arrived at 8:15 with a leather briefcase and the focused calm of a man who had done this before and knew exactly what it required. He sat at the kitchen table. He laid out the documents. He went through the sequence of the hearing one more time. Not because they hadn't heard it, but because repetition under pressure is its own kind of preparation. I present first, he said. I introduced the household situation, the confirmed paternity, the co-guardianship filing. I present Gerald Whitmore's statement. I present Patricia Odom's assessment, which, for the record, is favorable. He looked at Madison. Then their attorney presents. Do not react to anything she says. Do not look at the Holtz. Look at the panel. How many people on the panel? Madison asked. 3, Marcus said. Judge Harriet Calloway presiding. She has 22 years on the family bench. She is not sentimental, and she is not easily impressed. She is, however, deeply fair. That is what we need. What about the other 2? Daniel said. A child welfare specialist named Dr. Amos Park and a family services coordinator named Beverly Tran. Both experienced. Both focused on the best interest standard. He looked at both of them. Which, to be clear, is us. The best interest of that child is this household. Our job today is to make sure they see what we see. Emma appeared in the kitchen doorway in her school clothes. Backpack on. Gerald tucked under one arm. She looked at Marcus. Is today the day, she said. Today's the day, Marcus said. Emma looked at her father. Then at Madison. Then at Lily, who was in the bouncer seat, eating her own fingers. Okay, Emma said. She walked to the bouncer seat and crouched down. Lily, she said. Today's important. I need you to be good. I'll tell you about it when I get home. She stood up. She looked at Daniel. I already told Gerald everything. He'll be good energy from here. She put Gerald in the bouncer seat next to Lily. Then she picked up her backpack and walked out the front door to wait for the bus. Marcus watched her go. That child, he said, is going to be a force of nature. She already is, Daniel said. The family court building was a 40-minute drive. Daniel drove. Madison sat in the passenger seat with Lily's car seat behind her. Marcus followed in his own car. They didn't talk much on the drive. Madison kept her hand resting on the window ledge and watched the road, and Daniel kept his eyes forward and thought about nothing specific, which was a skill he had developed in the years after Catherine died. The ability to keep his mind deliberately blank in the minutes before something hard, to save whatever he had for the moment it was actually needed. They arrived at 9:40. The waiting area outside the hearing room was standard government building beige. Plastic chairs, fluorescent lighting, a water fountain in the corner. Daniel had been in rooms like this before. When Catherine's hospital bills went to collections. When Emma's school needed documentation after Catherine died. He knew the specific weight of official rooms, the way they make everything feel more permanent than it needs to be. He sat down. Madison sat beside him with Lily in her lap. Marcus was already talking to someone at the clerk's desk. And then Daniel saw them. Richard and Diane Holt were sitting on the other side of the waiting area. Richard was in his 60s, heavyset, with the careful posture of a man who had dressed deliberately that morning. Diane was small, neat, with dark hair going silver at the temples and hands folded in her lap. Their attorney, a woman in her 40s named Sylvia Crane, was standing beside them reviewing documents. They were not what Daniel had expected. He didn't know what he'd expected. Something easier to oppose. Maybe. Something that would confirm the neat narrative of people trying to take what wasn't theirs. But the Holts looked like what Madison had said. They were kind people. Organized people. People who wanted something and had gone after it through legitimate means. Richard Holt looked up and met Daniel's eyes. For a moment, neither man moved. Then Richard nodded once, a small, respectful acknowledgement. Not an apology, not a concession, just the recognition of one person toward another in a hard situation. Daniel nodded back. Madison had seen it. She looked at him. I know, he said quietly. She didn't ask what he meant. She knew what he meant. The hearing room was smaller than Daniel had expected. A long table at the front, 3 chairs behind it. Judge Calloway in the center. Dr. Park on her left. Beverly Tran on her right. A court reporter in the corner. 2 tables facing the panel, Marcus and Daniel, and Madison at one. Sylvia, Crane, and the Holts at the other. Lily sat in Madison's lap and looked at the fluorescent lights with the focused attention she normally reserved for ceiling fans. apparently having decided that interesting overhead fixtures were her primary area of study. Judge Calloway was in her late 50s, with the kind of face that had made a decision somewhere in its fourth decade to stop performing anything. She looked at the room, looked at both tables, looked at Lily, and picked up a pen. "We're here on the matter of placement and guardianship for Lily Renee Brooks. Age 5 months," she said. "I've reviewed the submitted documentation from both parties. I'm going to hear arguments, and I want to be clear about something before we begin." She looked at both tables equally. "I am not here to determine which adults in this room are better people. I am here to determine what is best for the child. Keep that standard in your minds when you speak." She looked at Marcus. "You filed first. Begin." Marcus stood up. He spoke for 18 minutes. Daniel had heard the outline of it already, but hearing it delivered was different. Marcus was not a theatrical man. He did not use dramatic pauses or emotional appeals. He spoke in the flat, authoritative voice of someone presenting facts that are strong enough to speak for themselves, and he let them. He presented the confirmed paternity. He presented the co-guardianship filing. He presented the documentation of Lily's 3 weeks in the Carter household. He presented Patricia Odom's assessment, which used the phrase stable, nurturing environment twice, and genuine family bond once. Then he presented Gerald Whitmore's statement. He read it aloud. Renee Brooks had written it in the careful, specific language of someone who understood legal weight. She described Madison's character over the course of a decade. She described the circumstances of Lily's conception and Madison's decision-making, not to excuse it, but to contextualize it as the action of a woman who loved deeply and made a mistake in the direction of that love. She described the home Madison had built for Lily in the 5 months of her life. She described, in one paragraph that made the court reporter stop typing for a moment, what Madison had said to her in the hospital the night Renee first told her she had named Madison as guardian. She had said, "I would burn the world down before I let anything happen to her." Judge Calloway looked up from her copy of the statement when Marcus finished reading it. She looked at Madison. Madison held her gaze. The judge looked back at her papers. Then Marcus said, "Your Honor, I'd also like to address the notation in the original case file regarding an incident at the hospital the night of Renee Brooks's death." Sylvia Crane looked up sharply. Marcus was already there. He presented it himself, in full, without softening and without dramatizing, exactly as he had said he would. A woman in grief, a hallway, 3 minutes, a voluntary compliance and an immediate apology, a single notation in 5 months of unblemished documentation. "The opposing party will likely characterize this as instability," Marcus said. "I characterize it as the only moment in this record where Madison Brooks stopped performing competence long enough to be a human being who had just lost her sister." He paused. "I would ask the panel to consider whether the absence of that moment would actually have made her a better mother, or just a more controlled one." He sat down. The room was very quiet. Sylvia Crane stood up and presented her case for 22 minutes. She was good. Daniel had expected her to be good, and she was. She spoke about stability and continuity of care and the documented track record of the Holt family. She spoke about the 7 years Richard and Diane had spent in the foster system, the 4 children they had fostered through to permanent homes, the 2 they had helped reunify with biological parents. She did not demonize Madison. She was too smart for that. Instead, she built a case around risk, around the word recently confirmed paternity, recently established household, recently rekindled relationship. She presented the hospital notation last. She was measured about it, careful. She did not call Madison unstable. She used the word concerning once and pattern of escalation once. And Daniel felt Madison go absolutely still beside him. And he put his hand on the table between them, where the panel could not see it. And Madison's hand moved to cover his, without looking down. When Sylvia Crane sat down, Judge Calloway looked at her notes for a long moment. "I have a question for Ms. Brooks," she said. Madison straightened. "You may remain seated," the judge said. "Ms. Brooks, you had 7 years to tell Mr. Carter about his daughter. Why did you come forward now, as opposed to 6 months ago? Or 2 years ago?" The room waited. Madison took a breath. "Because my sister died. she said. And my sister was the person who kept telling me the truth about myself when I didn't want to hear it. She told me every 6 months that I needed to call Daniel. I had excuses every time. After she died, I picked up Lily one morning, and I understood that I was about to become the same kind of story to Lily that I had been telling myself about Daniel. A person who made a choice and spent years explaining it instead of fixing it. She paused. I didn't want Lily to have a mother who did that. So I stopped doing it. Judge Calloway looked at her for a moment. Mr. Carter, she said, you confirmed paternity and filed for co-guardianship within 72 hours of learning about your daughter. That's fast. Yes, ma'am, Daniel said. Were you advised to do so for strategic purposes? I was told it would help the legal case, Daniel said. I would have done it regardless. Why? He looked at the judge directly. Because she grabbed my finger, he said. And I knew who she was. And there was nothing after that point where walking away was an option I was capable of choosing. Judge Calloway called a 15-minute recess. They sat in the waiting area again. Marcus was on his phone. Madison was feeding Lily from a bottle, her eyes on the middle distance. Daniel sat beside her and thought about the judge's face when she looked at them and tried to read something in it and couldn't. Because Judge Calloway's face was exactly what Marcus had said it was. Deeply fair, which meant it gave nothing away until it was ready to give something. Diane Holt crossed the waiting room. Daniel saw her coming before Madison did. He watched her approach, small, careful steps, hands clasped, and made a decision in approximately 1 second about whether to stand up. He stayed seated. Diane stopped in front of them. Madison looked up. I'm not supposed to be talking to you, Diane said. Sylvia would be furious. I don't particularly care right now. Madison said nothing. I want you to know, Diane said, and her voice was very steady, that we are not doing this because we think you're a bad mother. I want you to know that specifically. Then why are you doing it? Madison said. Diane was quiet for a moment. Because we have wanted a child for 11 years, she said. And when Lily's file came through, she was listed as having an unknown father and a guardian in unstable housing. And we thought, she stopped. We thought there was room for us. And then there wasn't. And by the time we understood that, the petition was already filed, and Sylvia said we had to see it through. She looked at Lily. She's beautiful. She is, Madison said. She looks like she belongs to you, Diane said. I want you to know I can see that. I could see it the second you walked into this room. Madison's jaw was tight. Mrs. Holt. I'm sorry, Diane said. For the hospital notation. Sylvia found it and I told her I didn't want to use it. She used it anyway. She looked at Daniel. I'm sorry to both of you. You deserved better than that from us. She went back to her side of the waiting room. Daniel looked at Madison. Madison was looking at Lily. She meant it, Madison said quietly. I know, Daniel said. It doesn't change anything about the petition. No, he said. But it changes something. Madison nodded slowly. Marcus appeared in the doorway. They're ready, he said. They filed back in. Everyone took their seats. Judge Calloway looked at her papers for a long moment that felt like considerably longer than a moment. Then she looked up. I'm going to be direct, she said, because this case does not benefit from anything other than directness. Nobody moved. The Holt petition is filed in good faith by people with a documented history of service to children in this system. And I want that on record, she said. This panel does not take that lightly. Sylvia Crane's posture shifted slightly. However, Judge Calloway said, and the word landed in the room with the particular weight of a word that has been carrying a decision behind it. The best interest standard in this state begins with biological family, when biological family is present, stable and capable. Mr. Carter is confirmed as Lily Brooks' biological father. He has demonstrated immediate, active engagement with his parental responsibility. Ms. Brooks has been Lily's primary caregiver since birth. The household they share has been assessed as stable and nurturing by the assigned caseworker. She paused. The co-guardianship filing is granted. Lily Renee Brooks remains in the care of her biological parents. The room took a breath. Sylvia Crane set her pen down. Richard Holt nodded once. Slowly to himself, the way a man nods when he has been hoping for something, and has received something else and is accepting it with whatever he has available. Diane Holt was looking at her hands. Judge Calloway was not finished. I also want to address something that was raised in the argument, she said. Regarding the incident notation from the hospital, I reviewed it. I would like the record to reflect that I find the use of that notation in this proceeding to have been disproportionate to its content. A woman expressing grief in a hospital hallway on the night of her sister's death is not a data point in a stabilities assessment. It is a human being in pain. She looked at Sylvia Crane briefly. I trust that distinction will be better observed in future proceedings. Sylvia Crane said, Yes, Your Honor. Judge Calloway looked at both tables one final time. We're adjourned, she said. Marcus shook Daniel's hand, and then Madison's, and said something about paperwork and timelines that neither of them fully absorbed, because the room was still ringing with the word granted, and the ringing was too loud for other information. On the other side of the room, Richard and Diane Holt were speaking quietly with Sylvia Crane. Richard looked up and caught Daniel's eye one more time. Daniel crossed the room. Marcus started to follow him, and Daniel shook his head slightly, and Marcus stopped. Daniel walked to Richard Holt and stood in front of him and held out his hand. Richard Holt looked at the hand. Then he shook it. I'm sorry, Daniel said, that you didn't get the outcome you came for. Richard looked at him for a moment. You're a good man for saying that, Richard said. You didn't have to. No, Daniel said. But you nodded at me this morning. Before any of this. That meant something. Richard looked at his wife. Diane was looking at Lily, who Madison was holding against her shoulder, patting the baby's back in the automatic, practiced way of someone for whom that motion has become as natural as breathing. She's going to be wonderful, Diane said to no one in particular. To the room. To whatever was listening. She already is, Daniel said. He went back to Madison. She looked at him. Ready? He said. Yes, she said. They walked out. Emma was sitting on the front porch steps when they pulled into the driveway. She was supposed to be inside. She had a key. The bus had dropped her an hour ago, which meant she had been sitting on those steps for an hour. Gerald, on her knee, watching the street with the patience of a person who has decided to wait for something and is not going to be moved until it arrives. Daniel parked. Emma stood up. She looked at her father's face. Then she looked at Madison's face. Then she looked at Lily in the car seat, visible through the window. Well, she said. She's staying, Daniel said. Emma sat back down on the step. She sat down the way a person sits when their legs have decided the standing part is over. Sudden and complete, and she put Gerald on her knee and looked at the yard and breathed. Daniel sat beside her. After a moment, Emma leaned against him. He put his arm around her. Madison came and sat on Emma's other side with Lily in her lap, and the four of them sat on the front porch steps in the October afternoon, and the neighborhood went about its business around them, indifferent and ordinary, and none of them said anything for a while, because the quiet was the right thing. Lily, Emma said eventually, looking at the baby. Lily looked at Emma. You live here, Emma said. That's official now. Lily grabbed Emma's finger. Emma looked down at the small fist around her finger, and her face did something that she would have denied if asked about it later. Something open and young and completely unguarded. And Daniel saw it, and Madison saw it, and neither of them said a word. That night, after Emma was in bed and Lily was asleep, Daniel found the velvet pouch in his sock drawer. He sat on the edge of the bed and held it, and thought about what Marcus had said. Figure it out before the 14th. He thought about what Madison had said on the porch steps. When this is over, what happens to us? He thought about everything the last 4 weeks had contained. Every conversation, every morning at the kitchen table, every moment that had been one thing on the surface and something else entirely underneath. He put the pouch in his jacket pocket. He went downstairs. Madison was at the kitchen table. The legal pad was in front of her, but she wasn't writing on it. She was just sitting, and the expression on her face was the one he had come to recognize as Madison at rest, which was different from Madison performing composure. It was quieter, more open. She looked up when he came in. Hi, she said. Hi, he said. He sat down across from her. He put the velvet pouch on the table between them. Madison looked at it. She looked at him. She looked at the pouch again. Daniel, she said. Before you say anything, he said. I am not proposing. I want to be extremely clear about that, because I have learned from prior experience that timing matters, and this is not the timing. She pressed her lips together. Then what is that? She said. That, he said, is something I bought 7 years ago and put in a drawer, because I didn't know what else to do with it. And I am showing it to you now, because I have been carrying it for 7 years, and you deserve to know that. Not as a question, not as a promise, just as a fact. She looked at the pouch. You kept it, she said. I didn't know why, he said. I thought about getting rid of it a dozen times. I didn't. She reached out and touched the pouch, but didn't open it. The night you drove to my apartment, she said. It wasn't a question. Yes, he said. She was quiet for a moment. I was already in Portland, she said. I had been gone for 2 days. I know that now, he said. If I had been there, she said. If I hadn't listened to your father. If I had opened that door. We'd be different people, he said. Emma wouldn't exist. Lily might not exist. Renee might still be alive, but she might not. The world that contains this specific version of us is built on all the things that went wrong. Madison looked at him. I don't want to go back, he said. I want to go forward. From here. From who we actually are. He put his hand over hers on the table. Over the velvet pouch, both their hands on this small, heavy object that had been waiting in a sock drawer for 7 years. That's what I wanted you to know. Madison turned her hand over and held his. Okay, she said. Okay, he said. I mean, yes, she said. To forward. To here. She stopped. Looked at their hands. To whatever this is. We're figuring it out, he said. Together, she said. Together, he said. The kitchen was warm, and the house was quiet, and somewhere upstairs, 2 daughters were sleeping in their rooms. And the ceiling fan that had been Lily's first friend turned slowly in the dark above her crib. And the morning would come the way mornings do, requiring things, presenting complications, moving forward whether you were ready or not. But tonight the kitchen was warm. Tonight was enough. 3 months later, on a Saturday morning, Emma Carter stood in the backyard holding Lily at arm's length and saying, Okay, you are 8 months old, I need you to focus. Lily was not focusing. Lily was trying to eat her own sleeve. Madison was watching from the back step with a cup of coffee, laughing at something Emma had just said, and Daniel was beside her. And when she laughed, she leaned into him slightly. The way people lean into each other, when leaning has become natural, when the space between 2 people has quietly renegotiated itself. He had not proposed. They had not rushed anything. What they had done was wake up every morning in the same house and figure out the day together, which was not romantic in any dramatic sense, but was. Daniel had come to understand the most real version of love he had ever been offered. Not the version where everything is urgent and charged and slightly desperate the way it is at 24. The version where you know someone's exact coffee order and their 3A, hem handwriting, and the specific sound they make when they're pretending something is fine and it isn't, and you love them anyway, and the anyway is the whole thing. Emma had started introducing Lily to people at school as her sister. Not her half-sister, not her sort of sister, her sister. Daniel had not corrected her. There was a drawer in the kitchen now that was Madison's drawer. The one where the legal pad lived and the pens she liked and the specific tea she drank at night that Daniel had started stocking without announcing it. There was a hook by the door with her jacket on it. There was a second car seat in his truck. These were small things. They were not small things. Patricia Odom had closed the case 2 months after the hearing with a notation that said, Simply, Lily Brooks Carter is thriving in a stable, loving family environment. No further review required. She had signed it, and that was that. The machinery of official concern satisfied and withdrawn, leaving behind a family that had been built not by plan but by choice, repeated daily, each person choosing to stay. The velvet pouch was still in Daniel's jacket pocket. He was in no hurry. Some things are worth waiting for the right moment, and the right moment has a way of announcing itself to spod who has learned to pay attention. Emma was now attempting to teach Lily the alphabet, which Lily was receiving, with polite disinterest. Emma said firmly. Lily looked at the sky. She's not going to answer you, Madison said. She might, Emma said. You have to start somewhere. Daniel looked at Emma, who was 8 years old and had appointed herself the educational director of her baby sister's intellectual development. He looked at Madison, who was watching Emma with the expression she wore when something delighted her, and she hadn't decided yet whether to say so. He looked at Lily, who had given up on the sleeve, and was now reaching for Emma's hair with enormous purpose. He thought about a rainy night 4 months ago, when he had opened a door and grabbed a woman's wrist and demanded to know who sent her. And the world he had known had simply stopped being the world he had known. And everything after that had been the process of learning to live in the new one. He thought about a ring in a velvet pouch and a drive he had made at 26 with hope in his jacket pocket, and the neighbor who had answered instead, and all the years between that night and this morning. The grief and the work and the loneliness and the slow, unglamorous, essential business of becoming someone worth knowing. He thought about what it meant that the knock he had thrown himself away from was the same knock that gave him everything. Madison looked at him. "What are you thinking about?" she said. "Nothing specific," he said. She leaned into him. He put his arm around her. In the yard, Emma got Lily to look at her by making a sound approximately no human language has ever used. And Lily looked at her with the startled, delighted expression of someone who has just encountered something unprecedented. And Emma said, Now you try. Some doors you slam shut because you are afraid of what's on the other side. And some doors, if you are honest enough and brave enough and lucky enough, knock back." Daniel Carter had been all three. And the family that had found him through one rainy night, one knocked door, one small hand around one finger, was proof that the life you didn't plan for can be more completely yours than anything you ever tried to build alone.